All right, so now you're going to get exposure to test-driven development. Test-driven development is such an important concept. Now, if you're building an application from scratch and the application is relatively simple, maybe you don't actually need to write test cases. Maybe you can just write the features without test cases and you'll be fine. But imagine you're working on an application that has millions of real users using the site. If you're a developer, what if you go and you broke some of the features and you updated a production server? That would be really scary, right? With millions of users, now you introduce all these bugs and your application doesn't work. You're stressed, your team's stressed, the company's losing tons of money every single second. And that could be stressful. So you can imagine as the application gets more complex and also as you get real users who are using the site all the time, building test cases become extremely important. So test cases, the way that it works is you basically write a function or a test case and say, hey, this function, should return this. Hey, is that really what happens? Okay. Or if I send a request to this URL, this is what it should, it should contain this word or it should do this. And does that really happen? So you're basically writing this test, which are basically additional functions, and you see if those test cases can all pass. Now you can go on to the dangerous side where you're writing so many test cases. So for example, for login and registration, which you have done through multiple times now, can you imagine how many test cases you could write technically? You could say, hey, okay, I want to see if the login works. If they don't put in the email, if they don't put in the password and click on the login button, it shouldn't go anywhere. It should display an error message. Hey, if I put in you give me an email but didn't put in the right password, it should display this error message. Hey, if I put in the right email but the password was too short, it should display this error message. So you can, or the registration, okay, do fill out all the forms except this one field and then click on register. Does it produce this error? Okay, now, you leave the third field blank and fourth field blank. So you can imagine with this simple feature that you might be able to create in an hour, you could actually spend 4 hours, 5 hours writing test cases, right? So again, when you're building an app that no one's using, test cases will slow you down by maybe 3 to 5 times. So it's just not efficient. But if you're working on an application with a lot of developers, real users are using it, knowing how to build test cases become really important. We introduced this rule where you say, before you add a feature, write the test case first. Run the test case. You haven't built the feature yet, right? So your test case should fail. It shouldn't pass. If you didn't write the feature and your test cases pass, that means, hey, something is wrong with your test case, right? So you write a test case before you build a feature, make sure it fails, then build a feature, and then make sure it passes. So again, we're going to introduce you to some of the tools in TDD, unit testing, and also Selenium, which is a powerful tool that is kind of become the de facto standard when it becomes QA and testing the front-end user experience. So you're going to have some exposure and learn how to write Selenium test cases. Again, doing this for a simple project that no one's using is an overkill, but it's a good idea to get exposed to this so that if you jump into a project that's established and if the team is using TDD approach, you know how to do that too. Okay, so it's important for you to understand and pay attention to these concepts so that you're well equipped, especially if you join a company that's practicing and preaching TDD. But I created this video so that you can understand the pros and cons of TDD. Sometimes it's really necessary. Sometimes it can really slow down development. So you need to know when to use TDD, when to not use TDD.